Hey there. How are you doing? So here in Vienna the evenings have become pretty dark and some of the days have been grey. They're overcast, there's rain, and you can tell that it's going to be probably quite a long winter. I know for some people that's not a particularly nice outlook. People prefer spring and summer when you can go outside. But I have to say, I do kind of enjoy these darker times of the year. And I recently found this book here about finding joy in urban life. And there's one small chapter about how to deal with winter and darkness. One of the suggestions is to go for a walk during the night. This isn't specific about winter, just generally. But I like her observations about seeing the city very differently once all the lights come on. There's a different feeling to it. And she also says another thing that I found really helpful. She says it's good to create and to accentuate contrast between night and day, between the light and the darkness. Because the dark too is good for our bodies and for ourselves. In order to be able to sleep, to find relaxation, to calm down. So it's a good thing to give the darkness some space. And I think that too counts for winter. And then this here is actually the part that I meant to pick out for today. It's about the color of winter. Because she too says she's not very fond of these long grey months that start usually in November. So her therapy has been to go to museums and to specifically look for color. And often she goes looking for yellow because it feels very optimistic, very bright, and cheers her up. So she looks at paintings by Jackson Pollock or Claude Monet. Or paintings of the sea by William Turner. Or maybe she just goes out and looks for some street art. We've already talked about that. So today I would suggest let's go and have a look at some colors. Of course, visiting a museum or maybe also a church can be really fascinating. We've had a look before at this postcard from, I think this is from Ravenna, with this beautiful mural from the Garden of Eden. Or a painting like this one that actually plays with this contrast between shadow and light, and it makes the red and yellow and even this blue seem all the brighter. And there's some Greek art with this beautiful contrast between the the black of these silhouettes and this bright orange in the background. Oftentimes, when you start learning a language, you come to a chapter about colors and it can feel kind of simple. It's just a handful of words that you learn. Usually they're black. In Russian here there would be черный. Then there would be green, зеленый, blue, синий, red, красный, yellow, желтый, and white, белый. But you see there's more shades in between. There's purple and pink, a lighter pink. There's a yellowish orange, there's ochre, there's different shades of yellow, of blue. Some of these colors can have very creative names. We've looked at that too. When I was trying to find a color for my kitchen. So there's all kinds of shades and all kinds of names like Wild Paradise, Waterfall, Balance, Green Poem, Spring Meadow, Summertime, Ray of Sunshine, Sweet Home, Tea Time. I have to admit, I still haven't painted my kitchen. I'm still torn between these different colors. Hula hoop, weiter Horizont, a wide horizon, Nordmeer, roter Ahorn, Gletscherblau. And of course it's not just about whether or not you like a particular shade. It's also about the impact it has on you and your well-being. Here in this little book, they suggest different color combinations to make you feel relaxed, to brighten your mood, to inspire you if you're working from home. And they tell you which shades go well with one another. Of course, these can be some marketing strategies too, but we know that colors have a big impact on our well-being, and there's a whole branch of color psychology. And again, it's not just about one individual color, but how you combine them. Let's have a look at that. For one, there's this difference between the colors that people call their favorites and colors that people tend to dislike. And you can see that everyone mentions one color eventually, but the tendency is for blue to be everybody's favorite color, followed by green and red, and a lot of people like black and yellow too. Brown usually comes out as the most disliked color, followed by a light pink, grey. This is more purple than blue, orange, yellow, and black. So here we have an overview of different color combinations and the impact they have on us, how they make us feel. We can see here that a mix of green, blue, yellow, and brown can be very calming. And the opposite would be red, orange, purple, and yellow. If you ask someone about warm colors, everyone's probably going to say it's red, yellow, and orange. Cool colors, on the other hand, are blue, white, silver, and grey. If you were to illustrate a picture of summer, you'd probably pick these colors here, and a painting of winter would look like this. But it's not just warmth and coolness, not just whether it's calming or stimulating. There's also things like whether a room feels welcoming and, well, I don't know if a room can feel polite, but politeness too has a color scheme. It would be pink, silver, white, grey, and green. And on the opposing end of the spectrum, a lot of black mixed with red and brown is called brutality. A lot of green mixed with white, brown, and blue feels very natural. You have the green of plants, the blue sky, brown soil. I don't know what the white would be. Maybe just a feeling of purity. If you're trying to illustrate something artificial, you might use purple, silver, pink, gold, and orange. For me, one thing that I can really feel when I look at these two boxes is the difference here between a friendly room and an unfriendly room. A friendly room might be in yellow, blue, pink, orange, and green. So it's warm, but it also has some calming elements to it. Some natural elements even. However, grey very dark, and it's probably a room you don't want to spend too much time in. So we might associate red with warmth, with extrovert people, with passion and joy, with love, of course, but also with aggression, with things that are forbidden, maybe even with hate. There's some passion in there too, after all. And blue can mean coolness and passivity. It can mean distance, but also science, wisdom, recovery, and trust when mixed with warmer colors. It can stand for sympathy and friendship, and for harmony. So any color that we look at can have different meanings depending on its combination and depending on our association with it and the specific context in which we encounter it. And I just briefly want to get back to this idea that Louisiana Scott mentions here. To specifically go to a museum to encounter colors, because I think that's one part that has always been important when it comes to colors and how we see and how we shape our world. And there are some beautiful examples here in this book, The History of Colors. And it starts off here. In these caves, in this part, 10,000 years before our time, when people specifically went into the caves to use red, brown, white and black to leave an image of their hands. To leave a trace of their existence here. In these places that they inhabited. To paint all the things that they could see and that ran with them through the world. These horses and bulls. These are really impressive than you think. It says here that we know people used to paint 40,000 years ago in Australia, and in South Africa they even found caves with equipment from 80,000 years ago. And it says it was just buried in the sand as if someone had just left it there for a moment with the intention to come back and to continue painting. Some of these colors are made from clay or from ashes, so these are mostly natural pigments. And some others were a little more difficult to make, like Egyptian blue. You can see it here in this glass eye of a statue from sometime between 1500 and 1000 before our time. In order to make Egyptian blue, you have to heat it to 800 or 900 degrees Celsius. If it's too hot or not hot enough, you get something that's more greenish, a mixture that you can't really use. And Egyptian blue has one really interesting characteristic to it, and that's that it turns up in infrared. Now, this is interesting for a whole different reason. If we're looking at Greek statues, then our association is usually that they look like this. Sort of a perfect white, just beautiful stone or marble statues without a trace of color. Just pure and perfect stone. But these two are from the 18th century. And it turns out our idea that these were just pure white comes from the fact that colors fade. So a lot of the antique sculptures that we know of have lost their color. They look white, but if you look closely, right here, you can see some blue in the beard of Hades. You can see traces of red in his hair. And if you look at these sculptures with infrared light, you might be able to find traces of Egyptian blue on their skin, which is not to say that they were painted blue, but they probably had a number of layers on them to make them look as natural as possible. And then of course you have very rare and expensive colors like purple. Purple too was created from a natural source, and depending on how exactly the fabric was dyed, it could come out in pink, bluish, or a deep red, sometimes even almost black. So here, this would be purple, something I would call Altrose. For me, purple is always more of a violet, but that too can depend on the language, simply because the color itself was not always the same. In medieval Europe, you had the use of gold and pure blue and red, pure white and black. And the gold here in the background was used because the paintings were not supposed to look like they were painted in the real world. They were meant to illustrate the world that we can see with our eyes, hence no shadows, no landscape, no perspective. What we see are icons. We see martyrs and saints, and we see them maybe as God would see them, beyond the limits of creation that we can perceive. Hence the use of gold. I know a lot of people think medieval paintings are a bit simple, but for me they're some of my favorites. I really like that look. And of course you often have these really expressive miniatures. Just look at their faces. We have these incredible shapes of blue later. Here in the roof of the tower. We have blue and gold, reds and greens, and white in the waves of the sea. We have here this painting by Andrea Mantegna from about 1500. And maybe this is the kind of yellow that our first author goes to look for. This beautiful bright yellow in stark contrast to the dark background. Or maybe here this light red, almost pink. And then there are details like this. I don't know, it might be a cup of porcelain with that delicate blue pattern. You have a page from the Quran from the 16th century. Again, using beautiful colors and using browns and beige. And it's a really beautiful color combination, don't you think? Of course, some of these colors too were incredibly expensive, like these shades of red. And they were used for special purposes. You can tell these were important people. This here is by Anthony van Dyck. Now imagine that the outfit itself was quite expensive too back then. Both dyeing the fabric and so much of it. And then creating the fit itself. Here we have this Chinese porcelain. With its blue patterns. from Italy. They tried for a really long time in Europe to recreate porcelain. They managed in Germany first, and eventually in other places too. Here, these are some of my favorite paintings in museums. This is only a tiny little part of it, but there are many Baroque paintings with these still lifes with different fruits. And sometimes these lemons and other citrus fruits look so amazing. It's almost like a jelly. It has such a strange shine to it. I really love standing in front of these and just taking in the colors and the textures. So that would be my color therapy in winter. Of course, today we have colors everywhere. Sometimes we might not even notice it anymore because it's such a normal part of our day-to-day life. Not only do we have plenty of color, we also have light in any color we want, so that's another thing that I could use for making my kitchen feel more comfortable. But I think ultimately the important part is to just take a little time to take in colors, no matter where we come across them. Maybe to think about how exactly they make us feel. Do they brighten our mood? Do they feel calming, relaxing? Do they make us feel like we're home? Does it feel inspiring or warm? Maybe in winter we're looking for a little heat, some light, some yellow, red, and orange. To get through these long winter days. Alright. So I hope you enjoyed this. And maybe you could find a little inspiration for the coming months. For now, thank you for spending some time with me. And I'll see you again next week. Good night.